I came home one day, expecting nothing more than silence and peace, but then I got a call that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Someone I trusted sold my late wife's most precious possession to fund their luxury vacation, and the pawn shop owner on the line told me something that I will never forget. What I discovered next changed my life forever. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Whisper Stories, where silence speaks. My name is Weston, and I am 63 years old. I've walked through enough winters and summers to know that life doesn't always play fair, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the day the phone rang and a stranger on the other end said, "I think you need to come down to the shop. There's something here that belongs to you." I had just settled into my favorite armchair with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring out the window at the barren winter trees when the call came. My hands trembled, not from age, I told myself, but from a sudden cold knot in my stomach. The voice was calm, polite, but firm. It belonged to the owner of a pawn shop I had never visited, and yet in his words I heard a hint of dread that made my pulse spike. I'm not sure what you mean," I said cautiously, gripping the phone a little tighter. "It's a watch, Mr. Weston, a Rolex. It was sold here recently, and I have reason to believe it belonged to your late wife." I froze. My wife Margaret had passed 3 years ago. She had been the light of my life, and every item she owned carried memories too heavy to bear. The Rolex was hers, a gift from our 40th anniversary, a symbol of decades spent together, of laughter, arguments, and the quiet, unspoken love that had defined our marriage. Why would someone sell it?" My voice cracked. "That's what I want to help you find out," the shop owner replied. I didn't know it then, but that phone call would set me on a journey I had never wanted to take, a journey filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and a lesson about the darkness that greed can invite into human hearts. Margaret had loved watches, not for the money, not for the brand, but because she believed that time itself was sacred. "Time," she would say, "is the only thing you can't get back, Weston. Treat it well and you'll live without regret." I remembered her delicate hands fastening the Rolex on her wrist. She had smiled that wide, warm smile of hers, the one that could light up an entire room even on the coldest days. I had promised her then, standing in our living room with champagne glasses in hand, that I would always protect it. And yet, now it had been sold like a trinket, as though all our memories could be traded for a beachside cocktail somewhere. I didn't know who had done it at first. My children were grown and scattered across the country, pursuing lives I could barely keep up with. It took only a few questions, a few sharp calls, and a sinking realization. The ones who had sold Margaret's watch were people I had trusted most, family. My own niece and nephew, their vacation fund more important than the memory of my wife, more important than the sanctity of what we had cherished. The day I confronted them was bitterly cold, the wind slicing through my coat as I walked toward their home. I was 63, my back a little stiff from decades of hard work, my face lined from sorrow and worry. Yet I forced myself to stand tall. "Weston," my niece greeted me, her smile bright but uneasy. "What brings you here?" I didn't answer immediately. I looked at her and at my nephew, who was fiddling nervously with his phone. "You sold her watch," I said quietly, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "The Rolex, Margaret's watch." There was a pause. Then the guilt, almost comical in its obviousness, flickered across their faces. We needed the money," my nephew stammered. "It was for a trip, a vacation." "A vacation," I said, the disbelief making my chest ache. "Do you know what that watch meant to me, to her?" My niece looked down, ashamed. "We didn't think it would matter. She's gone, Weston. It's just a watch." Her words hit me like a hammer. Just a watch. My Margaret had worn that watch every day for 15 years. She had celebrated birthdays with it, wiped away tears with it, and whispered secrets into its ticking hands. And they treated it like a pair of shoes. I left their house that day with the Rolex clasped in my hands, retrieved not with rage, not with vengeance, but with a quiet sorrow that seemed to pierce my very soul. I didn't speak of it for weeks. I didn't want to accuse them again, didn't want to feel the shame of knowing family could betray you for something as trivial as a vacation. When I returned home, I placed the Rolex on the mantelpiece. I could still smell Margaret's perfume lingering faintly in the air, as though she were watching, shaking her head at the foolishness of human greed. I held the watch in my hands, turning it slowly, letting the cold metal remind me of her warmth. It was then that I realized something. The watch, valuable as it was, had been a symbol, not a treasure. It had represented years of love, a life built together, the small joys that only two people who truly understood each other could share. Losing it had reminded me that memory and respect are far more valuable than any object. I called my niece and nephew weeks later when my anger had cooled into something closer to sadness. "I don't want the money you made from it," I told them. "I just want you to understand why what you did was wrong. Life isn't about vacations at the expense of others' hearts. It never will be." They apologized awkwardly, genuinely, and I forgave them. Not because what they did was forgivable, but because holding on to that bitterness would not bring Margaret back, nor would it restore the love we had shared. Forgiveness, I realized, is a gift you give not to others but to yourself. In the weeks that followed, I told the story to friends, neighbors, anyone who would listen. Each telling made me feel lighter, as though sharing the pain could dilute it. And with each retelling, I noticed a curious thing. My grief was no longer just sorrow. It had become a lesson. A lesson in respect, in the fleeting value of material things, and in the importance of honoring the memory of those we love. I still wear the watch sometimes, even now, holding it close and remembering Margaret's words. "Time is sacred," she would whisper. "Use it wisely." And I try to live by that, even at 63, even in a world where people will sometimes betray for nothing more than pleasure. I think about my niece and nephew too, and I hope they remember, not the guilt but the lesson. That what you take lightly may mean the world to someone else. That actions, no matter how small, can wound deeply if guided by selfishness. And that some treasures, like trust, like love, like memory, cannot be bought, cannot be sold, and cannot be replaced. It's been 3 years since that day. I still have the Rolex, still feel Margaret's presence in the soft tick of its hands. And sometimes, late at night, I whisper to her, apologizing for the pain humans can inflict upon each other, grateful that even in betrayal, love and memory endure. At 63, I've learned that life will test your patience, your faith, and your heart. But the true measure of a person isn't how they fall. It's how they rise after the fall, how they forgive, and how they treasure what cannot be replaced. And so I rise. I rise with the memory of Margaret in my heart, the Rolex on my wrist, and the knowledge that no amount of greed could ever take her love, or her lessons, away from me. Moral, true value lies not in material possessions, but in the love, trust, and memories we share. Greed may give temporary pleasure, but respect and integrity leave a lasting legacy.